Well, today we are continuing our series in crosswords. This is week 4. If you have your blue sheet with you, on the back will be an outline for you, and it'll kind of just outline what we're going through today. The last 3 weeks, Pastor has walked us through 3 statements that Jesus has said on the cross. He made a statement in one of those weeks just talking about the last 7 sentences of Jesus' life. Probably has some significance. If you could think about the last 7 sentences in your life, if you knew that you were about to die, what are the final words that you would say? And so the Messiah, the Son of God, his final words on the cross in the midst of anguish, these are the words that he said. And so today, just like that song we sang, the vivid imagery of Son of Suffering and what we just sang with Jesus, we're going to kind of walk through that story today. Have any of you guys ever watched like those 4K nature documentaries? You can get them on YouTube. They're like 3 hours long, and you're just like amazed by all the scenery. Has anybody ever like watched any of those or seen like National Geographic or anything? Well, whenever I'm studying, sometimes I'll just put one of those on in the background, and I'll turn the volume down low for the guy that's like commentating, talking about whatever's going on in that region of the world or the importance of it. But there's like these massive waterfalls, these towering mountain ranges, and scenery that like most people will never see. There's scenery that you probably will never lay your eyes on, but you're like, man, if I did, that's just breathtaking. It's incredible. And so sometimes like during my prayer and pondering in my study, I will occasionally like look up at the screen and I'll see these images just in the background. And I can't help but just think, wow, God made all of that. God made every detail, every organism, every ecosystem, the sheer scale, the power, the detail, the lightings and the color of creation, even the hidden places no eye has ever seen. God created all of that. And recently, Artemis 2 returned back home, and it had me thinking about space and how I really can't wrap my mind around the vastness of space. Like, just think about how big it is. This ever-expanding, created universe. And I'm just like, that doesn't sit in my head. I just can't fathom. I can't understand it very well. And there's this photo that I saw in school, and it kind of compares the Earth to like other planets and stars. And you can like look up at the screen, and you can see Earth in that first column, and then you see how big it is compared to Jupiter. And you're like, wow, Earth's not really big compared to that planet. But then as you like go down the scale, you'll see that final star, and you see how big and just the sheer mass of that star is. If you were to take Earth and compare it to that star, you would be taking a cue ball from like a pool table, and you'd be comparing it to Mount Everest. That's how big of a scale that is. And so I'm like thinking of this, I'm going, oh my goodness, I just can't comprehend that kind of just creation all throughout an ever-expanding universe and all these things, the scenery. I'm like, wow. And then there's me, my problems, my stresses, questions, my excitements, my worries, my dreams. And suddenly I feel so small. Like just in the vastness of all this, I feel so small. And small doesn't even feel small enough. And if all creation is a story, then I feel like I'm barely part of the ink that makes up a comma. And maybe more relatable, in all creation, I am merely like an atom floating in the air, or like a speck, for those that are Horton Hears a Who fan. Is this still on? We're still good? Okay. A Horton Hears a Who fan. Then something hit me as I was thinking about this image, as I was thinking like, wow, I'm really small in the nature of the universe. Like, it's almost unseen. We're present, but in the scale of what is, it almost feels unseen, kind of like the atoms that are all around us. And what if that tiny atom started asking, God, where are you? If you're so powerful, then why is this happening to me today, right now, in this season? Do you even know what you're doing? Are you even real? Can you even see me? In the scope of all that is, why should I even try? Why would God even care if I'm just but a speck in all that exists? And I just am sitting there and I just feel small. Then something crazier hit me. The God who created the galaxies that we will never see, beauty that goes beyond anything I can really comprehend, and every massive mountain that towers in the distance on earth, he also hears the voice of that unseen Adam and the scope of all that is. I see the size of the earth in comparison to that star, and myself in comparison to the size of earth, yet he still hears my cry. Not only does he hear the Adam's voice, but he knows this Adam intimately. He sees this Adam where they are. He cares about this Adam in a way it can't understand. He loves this Adam deeper than it can comprehend. Of everything God created, mankind was uniquely created in God's image, is what we see in Genesis. But God doesn't just watch mankind from a distance. No, he steps into it. The story of Jesus is this: the God who made everything stepped into what he made. Jesus didn't come as a king with power, but as a human with limits. The Word became flesh, according to John. He experienced humanity. He felt hunger. He felt being tired and exhausted from the day. He understood and felt the relationships, the toil and the struggle and the awesomeness that comes with relationships. He felt rejection. He went through puberty, and he experienced pain. He experienced human life, humanness. He understood what it's like to be you and I. The creation he made rejected him. The creation he made spit on him. The creation he made mocked him. Yet, John 3:16, quotable by many of us, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son." So when we talk about the cross, it's not just a man dying. It's the Creator stepping into the place of the created for the created. The one who holds the galaxies together is being held to some wood by nails. The one who hears the cry of every person is now crying out himself. My God, my God. And if we're being honest, we can't really understand that moment, not without feeling the intense and dramatic weight of it. The purpose of this moment, the intense suffering that was endured, the cost. And so I invite you to step into that moment with me. Take a moment to really experience what Jesus experienced. And we can't fully understand it. It's the most important moment in the history of the world. Today's crossword takes us to a moment where Jesus felt forsaken. And that'll be the fourth word or phrase, sentence that Jesus makes on the cross that we'll get to in a little bit. Crushed by the full weight of suffering in a place where help felt absent, carrying what sin produces, distance and separation. And so stay with me as we walk through this experience that leads to Jesus' piercing cry from the cross. One thing as I was going through this, and one thing for my life, is I love Jesus. I love Jesus. And going through something like this and walking through it crushes me every time. And I think it should have an emotional weight on every single one of us. If you say that I'm following Jesus, when we read this story, there should be an emotional response to the story. Our main text is from Matthew 27:46 and Mark 15:33 through 37. That is the phrase that says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's the same story, two different accounts from Matthew and Mark, and it should be at the top of your notes. If you don't have that, that will be what we're going through this morning. But before we get there, we're going to start in a place called Gethsemane. Jesus has just left what was called the upper room in Jerusalem, along with the 11 disciples after a Passover meal and a hymn. And they cross what's called the Kidron Valley, and they go to a garden called Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. And to kind of paint a picture, and there's a picture up here that kind of is modern day of Gethsemane. But Gethsemane would have been uneven, it's rocky, full of garden terraces and olive trees. It's not like a manicured park that you would see around Springfield today. Okay, there's not like playgrounds and play sets and quiet benches and things. It's more rocky, it's Middle Eastern. And so during this time, this festival, Passover, the city of Jerusalem is full of pilgrims. Temple is very active, there's Roman oversight, and political and messianic tension that is now rising. Political is normal, but now there's messianic. Passover celebrates the Jews being freed from another ancient, powerful empire. We know of Egypt from Genesis, Exodus. We see Moses leading the Israelites out of slavery. And so they would have festivals, they'd come together, they'd celebrate Passover during this time each year, where God rescued his people and freed them from oppression. But at this time, there's kind of an irony that the Jews are under Roman rule, who has oppressed them with heavy taxation, constant military presence, limited freedom, and Roman authority over everything. And so this kind of created tension during this time in itself each year, because the currently oppressed are celebrating being delivered from oppression. So there's already kind of, as the Roman soldiers and stuff, they're already dealing with kind of this political tension that kind of is created in itself. So Jesus is in Gethsemane. He separates himself from most of the disciples, but he brings Peter, James, and John further into the garden. And then he goes by himself and he prays. He prays alone. And he prays this, that his soul is very sorrowful even to death, according to Matthew. And he even asks, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup or the wrath of God pass from me." Even in understanding the weight that is to come, he says, "Your will be done." Jesus understands the full weight of what is about to happen, and he submits to the Father's will even so, in full humanity and divinity. And this is judgment language. Jesus is showing the anguish before any physical harm has actually been done. Luke records Jesus being in anguish, that his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Jesus was probably experiencing a rare condition where blood mixed with fluid emerges through sweat ducts under extreme stress. And Jesus knew what was to come, yet once again, he submitted to the Father's will even so. Question for you guys in kind of a relation of, have you ever been so nervous before doing something really big? Maybe for many that's like public speaking. Maybe it was in high school, you were in a play, or maybe it was a sporting event, your team just made it to a state championship, something big where there's a lot of people or a lot of pressure. And now I want you to just think about that pressure multiplying extraordinarily to the point that you are so anxious and nervous to the point that you are now sweating blood. If it's not literal blood, your sweat resembles the weight of blood. That is some real agonizing stress. You might even be thinking, I don't know that I still want to do this. Probably your knees are kind of getting weak. He's under some real stress in his humanity. Jesus' suffering began before he was betrayed and arrested. The stillness in Gethsemane suddenly breaks. Lanterns, weapons, torches, officials approach this quiet garden place. Matthew notes that Judas came, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs. After 3 years of close proximity, Judas greets Jesus with a kiss. And Jesus says, "Friend, do what you came to do." As they arrested Jesus, Peter reacted and drew his sword and took the ear of the high priest's servant. Jesus said to Peter, "Put back your sword, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." And Mark even notes that Jesus says, "Am I leading a rebellion?" to the officials that come with, there's swords and clubs. And what has Jesus done? He's done miracles. Jesus has led people to love one another. And they come to him as if he's leading a rebellion against them. Jesus It says, according to Luke 22, that Jesus touches the ear of the high priest's servant who Peter tried to probably not cut his ear off, but he ended up cutting the ear off, and it heals him. And after that moment, all the disciples left him and they fled. Jesus chose surrender over resistance. And so then Jesus is taken before several authorities. First, you have Annas, who's the former high priest, but still has a lot of authority. And so Jesus is bound, and him and the others take him to Caiaphas, according to Matthew 26, where he's accused of blasphemy and false witnessing. And as Jesus stood there, condemned the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, the entire Sanhedrin, all these religious leaders, they say he deserves death. And they spit on him, and they struck him. Just imagine, once again, we're putting ourselves in this place. Imagine someone coming up to you and just spitting in your face right now. Probably not a great feeling. Now imagine all these religious leaders spitting in your face, mocking you, hitting you, and say, you deserve death. Because of what? Then he was taken before the Roman governor named Pontius Pilate. Jesus was asked, are you the king of the Jews? And Mark even says that Jesus responds with, you have said so. And Pilate finds no guilt in him. He finds him innocent. In the synoptic gospel of Luke, Pilate sees no case for Jesus and asks if Jesus was Galilean. So since he was from Galilee, he's sent before Herod, who has jurisdiction over that region. And Luke accounts that Herod treated him with contempt and mocked him. So Jesus, everywhere he goes, is getting mocked. He's getting spit on. So he's sent back to Jerusalem, or back to a place in Jerusalem where Pilate declares that neither him nor Herod have found him guilty of anything deserving death. It was custom, according to Mark, he notes that it was custom at Passover to release a prisoner that the people requested. And so there's a guy named Barabbas that we'll get to in a second. But Pilate asks, do you want me to release the king of the Jews? Noting Jesus. So two Roman authorities at this point have now found no guilt in Jesus, but the crowds became aggressive and they begin shouting, crucify, crucify him, crucify him. And it gets more and more aggressive. And innocence is no longer the issue for Pilate. Pilate is a Roman governor. He's not a theologian. He really doesn't care about the theology of what's to happen. If he's a false prophet, witness, whatever, doesn't matter to him. But what he sees is there's a need for public order. And Pontius Pilate, if you read into his stuff, he's not exactly in the greatest case where he is. And he's looking at his job. And so Pilate brings out a man that was in prison for insurrection and murder. And Pilate, now in fear of losing control of the uprising crowd, Jesus is handed over to their will, while a guilty murderer is set free. Although no guilt was found in a city now swollen with angry Jews, with talks about another king in their midst, Pilate doesn't need this publicity and he listens to the crowd. He hands him over. The charge to be placed above him, above Jesus, would read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Now, it's important to note that this title was not given out of devotion from Pilate of like, oh, my new king, right? That would put him in a very bad position where he would probably get crucified, okay? But it's for the jurisdiction of his execution by Pilate. He has to have a reason to sign off on this thing, to charge Jesus with something. A crucifixion isn't a small thing. Putting someone through a gruesome death that is meant for criminals is a pretty big deal. And Pilate finds no guilt with him, but yet he signs it off. So there has to be a reason. And it was a political reason. This was a jab politically, but it was also a statement of sarcasm, mocking the religious leaders for bringing him a broken man. This is your king? And so he puts it above him as it's a mockery. King of the Jews. The Pharisees and all of them, they don't think he's their king. They're not going, oh, that's a good title. They're probably mad about that title. They are mad about that title. Little did he know that he was declaring the truth, though. Because Jesus is king. He's the king of the world. He's the Son of God. He's the fulfillment of old. Pilate took Jesus from there and they flogged him, according to John 19:1. And I know that on the screen it's a fairly gruesome image. But once again, I don't want us to miss the significance and the real anguish that Jesus experienced. This was a Roman beating meant to weaken, humiliate, and bring a man to near total collapse. This process would create deep lacerations all over the body, significant blood loss, which would create hypovolemic shock. For the medical people, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's where the blood can't cycle enough blood to the organs. Like you can't get enough blood to the things that help you function as a human being to stay alive. Abe mentioned earlier that this is actually how most people would die on the cross or in this thing, was from hypovolemic shock. There's no recorded number of whips. I know we often hear about the scourging, and there was a Jewish limit of 40, so they'd often do 39. Well, this is under Roman jurisdiction. This is not the Jews. And so there's no recorded number of whips, and Roman scourging did not follow the Jewish limit. So these skilled torturers, as you can see on the screen, would stretch him out and split open his skin lash after lash with what was called the cat o' nine tails, which I know it's very small, but you can kind of see what it would have looked like or something similar. And while this is happening, the soldiers are mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews! King of the Jews!" He's getting spit on, mocked. His skin's being torn, his flesh, his muscles, everything you can see, he's bleeding out. He was given a purple robe and a crown that was woven of hard thorns that were pressed into his scalp while they continued to mock, beat, and spit on him. King of the Jews. Isaiah had prophesied of this suffering servant that was to come in Isaiah 53. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. In an honor-shame culture, Jesus was being publicly humiliated. And I don't think from our understanding from society and culture, we can really understand that honor-shame culture in that capacity. But public humiliation is a really big deal. It's a really, really big deal. In the Roman world, crucifixion was not only pain, but public degradation. Victims were stripped to nothing, to nakedness. They were displayed in their nakedness. They were mocked. They were made examples of to the public. If you do this crime, this is what you'll become. You were an example. This was social annihilation as much as it was physical torture. It said this person is beneath dignity. Isaiah had spoken of this 100 years before. In Isaiah 52, we just had quoted chapter 53, but the chapter before says his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance and his form beyond that of the children of mankind. And if you compare this accuracy to what was fulfilled in Jesus, Jesus was beaten so badly he no longer looked human, according to this text, which would have made him look unrecognizable. So here we have the Son of God who took on flesh, humanity, mankind, now appears less than human to restore those made in his image. Bleeding and broken, disfigured and hard to recognize, they then place a beam on his back. John 19 says, bearing his own cross, Jesus walks towards Golgotha, the place of the skull. The condemned were often required to carry this cross beam to their execution. Often the center beam would be in place, and then they would carry this cross beam. This cross beam it varied in weight, but typically it'd be between 75 to 125 pounds. They're using trees, wood. The old rugged cross, Pastor mentioned earlier to me, this is a rugged piece of wood. Imagine you just got beaten, your flesh is showing. Muscles, Abe said, imagine if you have a paper cut, multiply that by 1,000, and now stick it onto some wood and just start rubbing it as you're walking. This is not exactly a fun time, okay? And it just gets worse. That's the hardest part, is the whipping and stuff in itself, the mockery in itself. Each thing in itself is something that would traumatize a person for a lifetime. But you put it all together, I can't fathom the mental, the emotional, the spiritual toll that is taken on Jesus as he feels the weight of our sin. The likely distance that they would carry this crossbeam was about 1/4 mile. But before making it there, Jesus, too weakened to carry, according to the Gospel of Mark, Simon of Cyrene was compelled to carry the cross for him the rest of the way. When I was reading that, I just kind of broke me up of just like, wow, I wonder if he knew what an honor to carry the cross of Christ. That should be mine. I wonder if that was him. This should be me. Golgotha was outside the city walls, near a road, invisible enough that many people could read the charge above Jesus. The same region where Abraham was the sacrificed region on Mount Moriah. Same kind of region and area. Once again, the sign, King of the Jews, would be placed above him. And so just outside of the city, at Golgotha, the place of the skull, you can kind of see how it looks like a skull in the rock. They crucify him. Jewish day starts at sunrise, so 6 a.m. would have been the first hour, or around that time. It was approximate, it wasn't definite. We used precise time, they did not. And so about 9 a.m. at the third hour, 3 men had their arms stretched, nails driven, and their feet fastened to old rugged crosses. People were passing by on the roads nearby as another execution took place at Golgotha. Chief priests, scribes, elders watched their condemned face his punishment. He deserves death. Women, followers of Jesus, stood at a distance watching this horrid moment unfold. Roman soldiers sat close as they casted lots over the clothes, while 3 men faced a level of anguish unlike any pain that they have ever known, 2 of them knowingly deserving so. Breathing instantly became a laborious task as they would have to push in the nail. Every small movement intensified the pain greatly. Jesus is bloody, in shock, cramping, intensely thirsty, and weak beyond anything I can compare to. Before noon, Jesus makes 3 statements that pastors covered over the last 3 weeks. Father, forgive them, persecutors. Today you will be with me in paradise, one of the criminals next to him. Woman, behold your son, his mother, Mary. And even in immense distress, Jesus is still oriented outward. He's still oriented towards people that he's looking at. The people that are beating him and mocking him, forgive them. To his mother, I need to take care of you. To the criminal next to him, you're going to be with me in paradise. It's not too late because life comes through me. The cross was not only torment, but it was mission. It was mercy displayed. It was fulfillment. And then in Matthew 27:45, there was darkness from the 6th to the 9th hour. And this reflects biblical imagery of judgment and mourning. The now Son of God hangs in suffering, and there's silence from Jesus for 3 hours. The Gospels have no record of any words from Jesus during this time. To kind of help understand darkness a little more, I want to refer to Psalm 88. It's one of the darkest prayers in Scripture. It gives us language of this kind of darkness. It's the humanistic expression of unanswered anguish. My soul is full of troubles, verse 3 says. A few verses later, it says, you have put me in the depths of the pit. Why, O Lord, do you cast my soul away? And in verse 18, it says, darkness is my closest friend. I know some people in this room have experienced really, really dark moments in your life. You probably could have even read that passage at parts of your life. Darkness is my closest friend. For 3 hours, there is silence, there's suffering, and a heavy weight upon Jesus. Jesus is standing in the place where we should be. He entered what our sin produced. But then silence breaks. In the 9th hour, around 3 p.m., Jesus, in the midst of all of this suffering, cries out loudly, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me? Earlier, Jesus had said, "Father, Father, forgive them." And now he cries out in a feeling of abandonment, not using father language, but my God. Still personal, still in relationship, but my God, my God. This echoes Psalm 22, which the Jews would have known very well. A cry from David in a feeling of abandonment, surrounded by enemies, mocked and suffering in his own life. In verse 1, it says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The words that were just spoken by Jesus, quoted by him, which often in Jewish language was going to regard the entire psalm. And so verses 7 and 8, "All who see me mock me." And then there's a mockery. "He delights in the Lord, so let God deliver him." Talking about David. In verse 16 of Psalm 22, "A company of evildoers surrounds me. They have pierced my hands and feet." David vividly describes the suffering and exposure of the righteous sufferer. It's echoing the imagery of what Jesus is currently going through. Verse 18 says, "They divide my garments among them. For my clothing they cast lots." A lot of similarity. While this Psalm of David that Jesus echoes starts with suffering, it ends with vindication. In verse 24, Psalm 22 says, "He has not hidden his face from him, but has heard when he cried to him." God hears our cry. God hears the cry of the man who's being oppressed, who's in the midst of darkness, who's in the midst of anguish, who's in the midst of pain. God hears us. In all that is, he hears the speck. He hears you. Not only that, but Jesus is literally in the midst of the pain. He's experiencing more than any of us can fathom. Then we get towards the end of the psalm, where it says, "All the prosperous of the earth eat and worship. Before him shall bow all who go down to the dust." And he finishes by saying, "They shall come and proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, that he has done it." David's cry came from the experience of a righteous sufferer, surrounded by enemies, mocked, weakened, and feeling abandoned. But Jesus takes David's words farther than David ever could. Jesus takes the words of David in affliction and takes it farther than David could ever go. Not only suffering unjustly, but bearing sin in the place of sinners. Jesus is locating his suffering inside Scripture's redemptive pattern. Jesus is pointing out that he is the fulfillment of Scripture. The religious leaders that are surrounded, they understood what Psalm 22 was. They understood what this implied. Did they get it? In this phrase stands a theologically debated paradox that I have to mention. Jesus is fully man and he's fully God, and it can seem like there's like this split in the Trinity. However, an eternal, united, triune Godhead cannot become suddenly separated. You can't just split up this Godhead. There's no rupture in the divine essence of the Son from the Father and the Spirit, yet there is a real dereliction or abandonment, judgment-bearing condition in the experience of the incarnate suffering Son. Jesus is feeling the absence of help, the absence of comfort, the absence of the nearness that he has always known with the Father. He feels absence, loneliness. It is not good for man to be alone. He feels lonely. Jesus, in his true humanity and mediatorial work, enters the God-forsaken condition that sin deserves so we don't have to. Jesus is alone on a cross, beaten and bloody for me. Jesus experiences forsakenness while still being the beloved Son. Think about the difficulty it would be to watch your beloved Son helplessly suffer. It's not theatrics, but real anguish. It's real love. It's real sacrifice. It's real struggle. It's real suffering. Jesus, the righteous King, is standing in the place of where the guilty belong. This moment is not merely suffering endured, but it's atonement accomplished. This moment is not about death, it's about substitution, the innocent standing in the place of the guilty. Jesus is making things right between mankind and God. The relationship that was broken because of sin is now restored through Christ. Jesus, our substitute, took our place in what we deserved because of our sin. If the worship team wants to make their way forward as we close, this is not merely a tragic execution. This is our place being taken by another. The shame should have been ours to hear. The judgment should have been ours to carry. The exposure, the curse, the condemnation, the abandonment that sin deserves, it was mine. It was ours. But it could never finally be borne by us because we are the guilty ones. We'll do how deep the Father's love. So the sinless Son steps into the place of sinners. He is scourged though innocent. He's mocked though the true King. He's condemned though righteous. He's forsaken though he's beloved. The God who made galaxies does not lose sight of you. And I think this is really important this morning as we contemplate the things that Jesus did on the cross and its purpose and the why. The one who holds creation together stepped into suffering for you. The one who cried out in darkness means that you're never alone in yours. Because Christ entered the forsaken place, the God-forsaken place, those who are in Christ will never be forsaken. Those who put their trust in him can hear the opposite words. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Jesus was forsaken by God in our place so that in him we never have to be forsaken. God sees you, he sees me. God knows us intimately. He created you. He knew that you were going to exist at the creation of the world. He knew that you were going to be here today. It's not an accident that you were created. It wasn't like, just by the way the particles and things happen in the universe. No, God intimately created you on purpose, for a purpose, with a purpose. There's no accident in what he created. And the cross proves how deeply he loves each of us. I think that the story of Jesus should emotionally affect us. It should bring me to tears. It should cause my stomach to turn because it's for me. It's for you. It's for us. We've all seen movies and we've seen TV shows where our favorite character, something unjust happens. Maybe they get killed off. Something we're like, oh no, get me the box of tissues because something really bad is happening. this is real. This Jesus who died on a cross is real. And this really, really happened. And not only that, but you're a part of the story because it happened for you. It happened for me. And lastly, that should compel us to live differently. The cross should compel us to live differently. This morning, if you are hurting where you are, I just want to encourage you in the fact that Jesus sees you where you are, that God sees you where you are, and he's in the midst of it. Whether you're feeling the comfort or ease of pain, I just want to remind you that Jesus felt pain. And it doesn't always take the pain away, but he understands. If you guys want to stand with me, we're going to go into this song, How Deep the Father's Love for Us, just one last time. And hopefully we have another perspective of the imagery of Jesus and the implications of the cross. But real quick, I would just love to pray as we go into this. God, thank you so much for sending your son on the cross to die for me.